members of Madagascar's National Assembly voted to impeach President Rajoelina, who fled the country early in the week amid nationwide protests.
Brothers and sisters of Africa, before we begin, please take a moment to like this video so that YouTube recommends it to more people who care about Africa's future. Your support helps us keep Africa's voice strong, independent, and truly African. It is a moment of great uncertainty in the island nation of Madagascar. Once hailed as one of Africa's emerging democracies, the country has now entered a new and uncertain chapter following a dramatic military coup. The man at the center of this political storm is Colonel Michael Randrianirina, an army officer who has declared himself head of state after the overthrow of President Rajoelina. The African Union has reacted swiftly, suspending Madagascar's membership from the continental body, calling it an unconstitutional change of power. But behind these headlines lies a deeper story, one that reveals the struggles, frustrations, and aspirations of the Malagasy people. In this video, we explore what led to this coup, who Colonel Randrianirina is, and what his rise to power means for Madagascar, the Indian Ocean region, and Africa at large. For months, tension had been building in Madagascar. Across cities like Antananarivo, Toamasina, and Fianarantsoa, frustration was boiling over. Ordinary citizens were tired of daily blackouts, water shortages, and rising food prices. The young and restless generation, who make up more than half of Madagascar's population, felt forgotten. They saw wealth and opportunity concentrated in the hands of a few, while the majority struggled to survive. By late September 2025, those frustrations had turned into street protests. What began as small demonstrations against utility failures quickly grew into a nationwide movement demanding justice, reform, and dignity. As protests intensified, the government of President Rajoelina found itself increasingly isolated. Attempts to silence the demonstrations only fueled anger. The country's parliament, itself divided and disillusioned, began moving toward impeachment proceedings against the president. In response, Rajoelina tried to dissolve parliament, a desperate move that only deepened the crisis. Within days, the situation spiraled out of control. Then came the moment that changed everything. On October 14, 2025, soldiers from Madagascar's elite CAPSAT unit, the Action Committee for State Security, marched into the capital and took control of key state institutions. Leading them was Colonel Michael Randrianirina, a disciplined but controversial military figure known for his earlier criticism of Rajoelina's leadership. With armored vehicles positioned around the presidential palace and the main broadcasting station seized, Randrianirina declared that the military was stepping in to restore order and protect the nation. President Rajoelina, sensing the gravity of the situation, fled the country that same evening. Reports later suggested he had sought refuge in Dubai, leaving behind a nation gripped by uncertainty. Within 24 hours, Colonel Randrianirina appeared on national television to announce that he was assuming the position of president and that the military would oversee a transition lasting between 18 months and 2 years before organizing new elections. He called this phase a necessary refoundation of the nation, promising to rebuild state institutions, fight corruption, and restore basic services. He also pledged that the army had no long-term political ambitions, saying, "Our goal is not to rule, but to reform." However, the announcement sent shockwaves through the international community. The African Union condemned the coup in the strongest possible terms, calling it an unconstitutional change of government. Within hours, the AU's Peace and Security Council met in emergency session and suspended Madagascar's membership from all its bodies. The AU urged the restoration of constitutional order and warned against any form of repression or human rights violations during the transition. Madagascar's suspension from the AU carries both symbolic and practical consequences. It isolates the country diplomatically, potentially cuts off access to AU development funds, and sends a message that military takeovers will not be normalized on the continent. But for many Malagasy citizens, the AU's reaction seemed distant compared to the realities they face: economic hardship, hunger, and years of political instability. To understand this crisis, one must look at the man now holding the reins of power. Colonel Michael Randrianirina is not new to controversy. Born in the Androy region of southern Madagascar, he rose through the ranks of the army with a reputation for discipline and a nationalist outlook. Before leading the CAPSAT unit, he served as a regional governor and commanded various infantry battalions. In 2023, he was briefly arrested for allegedly plotting a coup against President Rajoelina, but was later reinstated after receiving a suspended sentence. During the recent protests, Randrianirina gained popularity among ordinary soldiers when he ordered his men not to open fire on demonstrators, declaring that the army's duty is to protect the people, not oppress them. That decision elevated him from a mid-ranking officer to a symbol of resistance against perceived government corruption and mismanagement. In his first address as transitional leader, Randrianirina vowed to reform state institutions and launch anti-corruption measures. He promised to restore the dignity of the Malagasy people and ensure that future elections would be free, fair, and transparent. Yet his announcement that the military intends to govern for up to 2 years before handing over power raised questions about how genuine his democratic intentions really are. Critics within Madagascar and abroad warn that such transitions, if not carefully managed, often lead to prolonged military rule. The recent history of Africa offers many examples where soldiers seized power in the name of reform, only to stay in control for decades. That is precisely why the African Union and the United Nations have urged Randrianirina to set a clear, verifiable timetable for elections and to include civilian representatives in his transitional administration. Still, the colonel's message of reform resonates with many Malagasy citizens who have lost faith in the political elite. They see him as a disciplined soldier who speaks the language of ordinary people. On the streets of Antananarivo, many residents say that while they do not support coups, they hope the new regime will at least bring some stability and relief from corruption. Economically, however, Madagascar faces a steep uphill battle. The coup has already triggered fears of international isolation. Some foreign investors have paused projects, and the World Bank has warned that it may review its ongoing programs in the country. Air traffic was briefly disrupted, and the local currency, the ariary, has come under pressure. Tourism, one of Madagascar's vital sources of income, is also likely to take a hit, as travel advisories from Europe and Asia caution visitors against visiting the country until stability is restored. Domestically, the biggest challenge for Randrianirina will be legitimacy. Without a civilian mandate, his authority rests largely on military control and public patience. He has dissolved the Senate, the Constitutional Court, and several other institutions, arguing that they were corrupt and ineffective. Yet by doing so, he has also created a dangerous power vacuum. Rebuilding these institutions and ensuring they function independently will be a critical test of his leadership. Another potential challenge lies within the armed forces themselves. While the CAPSAT unit led the takeover, not all segments of the military fully support Randrianirina. Reports indicate that some senior officers remain loyal to the ousted president. If divisions deepen, there is a risk of internal conflict or even a counter-coup. Maintaining unity within the ranks will be essential to avoid sliding into chaos. The coup in Madagascar has also reignited debates across the continent about the growing wave of military interventions in African politics. From Niger to Gabon and now Madagascar, the question arises: why do citizens increasingly view the military as an alternative to failing civilian governments? The answer lies partly in the erosion of trust in democratic institutions. In many countries, elections are seen as manipulated, parliaments as corrupt, and courts as instruments of the elite. When people lose faith in the system, they often welcome anyone, even soldiers, who promise change. However, history shows that genuine transformation rarely comes from the barrel of a gun. Sustainable progress requires inclusive governance, strong institutions, and respect for human rights. For Madagascar, the coming months will determine whether this coup becomes another setback in the country's fragile democracy or the beginning of a painful but necessary renewal. The African Union's suspension of Madagascar may pressure the new authorities to accelerate the transition. Still, sanctions alone may not be enough. What is needed is constructive engagement, a framework that encourages the military government to hold credible elections, rebuild public trust, and protect civil liberties. Regional organizations like the Southern African Development Community, SADC, will also play a key role in mediating dialogue and preventing the country from descending further into crisis. As the world watches, the people of Madagascar stand at a crossroads. On one side lies the promise of reform and stability under Colonel Randrianirina's transitional rule. On the other lies the danger of authoritarianism, isolation, and renewed instability. The balance between these paths will depend on how the colonel chooses to exercise power, whether as a servant of the nation or as another strong man in uniform. What happens next in Madagascar will resonate far beyond its borders. It will test Africa's commitment to democracy, governance, and unity. The story unfolding on this island is not just about one man or one country. It is about a continent still wrestling with the question of how to build systems that truly serve its people. Brothers and sisters of Africa, let us continue to follow this story closely, not with despair but with hope. Hope that one day, every nation on this continent will find its path toward justice, dignity, and genuine independence. If you believe Africa deserves better leadership and stronger unity, don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to Voice of Africa, where we tell Africa's story in Africa's voice.